Such an abrupt cutoff. Welcome to WooCommerce Live, episode 3 of season 3. I'm Jonathan Wold, and I lead community initiatives here at WooCommerce. And with me is my co-host, Noelle Steegs. She's a developer and a volunteer here in the WooCommerce community. Good to see you, Noelle.
Good to see you too, Jonathan.
So today we're going to be talking about finding and keeping customers for your e-commerce business. That was one of the other popular topics that y'all asked for. We've been gathering all your questions and we'll be answering as many as we can on today's show. And at the end of the show, we'll have live Q&A and we'll answer new questions that you've got. So think about some of the questions that you'd like to ask, and you can drop them here in YouTube or on Facebook, wherever you'd like, and join us for the Q&A after the episode. So, Noelle, what are some of the wins that we have to celebrate in the community this week?
Yeah, I'd like to spotlight 2 of our community members. The first one is Annie Pang. He's been in the community for 3 weeks, but he's already in our past month's top 10 of most engaging people. So he's been asking questions, commenting or helping other people out. So that's just great to see. Another one that I would like to highlight is David Jash, and he's been in the Facebook group since 2014. Can you believe it? That's awesome to see that somebody sticks around for that long. And what I love about him is there are not that many people answering super technical questions in the group, right? So he's actually helped me when I had questions, and he does it he goes above and beyond. He just took so much time to explain it in an easy to understand way, but it was a really technical subject. And that's a gift right there to be able to do that. So thanks, David, for that.
That's fantastic.
Some awesome community members this week.
That's fantastic. And if you're not a member of the Facebook group, I recommend checking that out. There's we're just about 40,000 members now, and a lot of fantastic things happening there. On the meetup front, we have new meetups coming online all the time, but I want to give a special shout out to the WooCommerce London meetup. They meet once a week, a few hours earlier than now. So for those of you on the West Coast, it's pretty early, but if you're in the London or anywhere in Europe, it's a fantastic meetup. And you missed today's, but next week they're doing it again on Wednesday. So definitely check that out. Awesome. So let's jump right into today's topic. So we're talking about creating customers, and what's that all about? Customers, if you're in an e-commerce business, ultimately it's about creating value and solving problems for the audience that you've chosen, right? That's what you're in business for. And when you do that well, you succeed. So Jeff Bezos recently is stepping back as CEO of Amazon. So it's given a lot more opportunity to look at the legacy of what Amazon has done over the past 27 years or so. And what they are famously relentless for is they're focused on customer experience and creating more and more value. And that focus on value leads to loyalty, right? Customers who keep coming back and they tell others. So we've organized today's topic into based on the questions that you sent into 2 parts. We're going to talk about finding new customers, and then we're going to talk about how do you keep those customers happy, right? You get them in the door, but you want them to stay there as long as possible. So we had a lot of questions come in, and so we're going to try to group them. Here's a couple of them. So Manera asked, what's the best way to create and keep customers? Chris asked, how do I attract customers cheaply and accurately? That's a good question. Cassia asked, where do you start when you're launching a business from scratch and it's a new service being offered? And then some was specific, and he said I had a very special niche with a huge pool of potential customers. Instagram and Facebook aren't reaching them. He doesn't want to do ads. How do I reach that specific customer? So all of those have a few things in common. I'm going to reframe that question as, what would you do to attract new customers without spending any money, right? There's sort of that general theme to it. And we've got a couple of thoughts for you. So first, if you've watched Woo Live season 2 previously, you've seen us, we've talked about the different steps from idea to first customer. And it begins with choosing an audience, right? And picking an audience that you want to serve, finding the problem that audience has, and then you come up with an idea for solving that problem and you work to sell it before you make it. So as we talk about this, like how do you find those customers without spending money, you have to keep those things in mind first. You have an audience that you've picked, a problem that you want to solve for that audience, and you've worked to take the idea you have for your e-commerce business and you're selling it to them before you make it, right? So here's a few pieces of guidance, some things to think about. First and foremost, go to where your audience is. Engage with audience members individually and broadly. So one-on-one, like reach out to them like, hey, I wanted to check and see if I noticed that you confirm with them like, hey, you have this particular problem. I have an idea. What do you think? Is this a possible solution to your problem? Does it sound like a good fit for you? And maybe there's a Facebook group that's focused on the audience. Maybe there's something else entirely. Figure out where your audience is and go there with your potential solution. Within that same vein, one of the things that you can do is identify influencers that focus on the audience. Now, influencers is a fairly loaded term. It can bring to mind people just like wasting a bunch of time on Instagram or kind of wherever else. But if you think of it like as it's meant, it's an influencer is someone who's focused on providing value to a particular audience, right? Those who do it really effectively and have true influence. And one of the things you can do is identify folks who serve that audience that you're wanting to serve and look for opportunities to create mutual wins, right? Where you can create a win for them and for their audience. You might create a special offer. You might create a special version of your product. I like that idea a lot, where you could brand it for that influencer, and you might work out a deal with them where you give them a percentage of sales. So Neil Patel had a great resource that Noel found. That'll just drop up here. Put it on the chat or put it on the screen. Whoops. There we go. Well, here's this pop-up. Let's close that out. How to acquire customers on a $0 marketing budget. So we'll drop a link to that, but this is another great resource. You can dive into the topic a bit further.
Yeah, I love like he shows examples, and then big companies like Dropbox, for example, that then how they did it. So I really love how he breaks that down and is so easy to follow. He really laid that out so well.
Yeah, he's consistently delivering some great content there. Awesome. Noel, do you want to jump to the next question?
Yeah, so Stephen asked, how do I generate users for a marketplace, customers and vendors? Now, I got into web development through putting up a type of marketplace, which was like a drop shipping platform, right? So I also was dealing with vendors. Generating customers for a marketplace is a lot, I don't want to say easier, but it's maybe easier to find resources about that. It's talked about more. But when it comes to the vendors, like I was in a very specific niche, and I just Googled and I went on to platforms like Etsy, and I just basically looked around and dug for like these special gems that I found. And I contacted them directly and I explained to them the platform I'd set up. I shared data with them that I had. And I really did a personal email, explaining why them specifically. And I had a very good response rate to that. So I really think, yes, it takes a bit more time to craft a personal email for everybody you want to invite. But I think if you do personal instead of this one email to a lot of contacts, I think you'll have more success with that. So hopefully that's helpful.
That's awesome. And I love the concept of a marketplace in general. It's something that we see more folks doing. And you have to get both sides, right? You have to have the customers and the supply at the same time. And like Noel said, so much of it and what I've observed is about that personal, like investing that effort into a personal relationship, letting them know like, hey, why you want to do this and what's in it for them, etc. So great question. So Ken and Krishna. So Ken asked, what's the best ad platform for beginners? And Krishna asked about how do I do like retargeting? So ads, great topic. Ads can be really powerful. They can also be a fantastic waste of money. And we don't want to see you do that, right? So what I found to be really helpful is to think about advertising as a multiplier for what works. So figure out figure out what works, get that audience right. And I realize sometimes, in some cases, like ads can be a perfect way to sort of test something and check it out, right? But in general, I'd encourage you to like focus on like having that one-on-one interaction and testing your ideas out without spending money, and then use advertising as a way to then multiply that. It's like, all right, I have something that works. Now let me spend some money to get more traffic focused on it. As far as the question about beginners, I'll also put it this way. In general, Facebook is a great platform for reaching folks for an e-commerce business. There's a lot of resources out there on like how to use Facebook. I think my high level guidance is start small and prove that something's working, because it can be very easy to spend a lot of money quickly and get frustrated that something's not working the way that you want it to. One resource that I'll share here is on the WooCommerce blog. There's 6 ways to turn social media followers into customers, and just has some general guidance on how to play with the different platforms, and what it covers also applies to the concepts of advertising. So wanted to offer that as a resource. Awesome. What was the next? What do we have next, Noelle?
So Krishna asked about what is the best way to accurately target customers. And Dee asked, if your product is targeted at different types of customers, is it better to target one group at a time? So for example, hobbyists and then stay-at-home moms, etc. The best way to accurately target customers, it really depends on the platform. So it's quite a broad question. But for example, from experience, I can talk about search engine optimization. So if you plan on writing blog posts, for example, to help yourself rank higher and go into, the content marketing strategy, you want to make sure you include the right wording. And sometimes the wording that you use might not necessarily be what people type in Google. So I really recommend you can Google for like the keyword planner. The Google Ads keyword planner is really helpful for that. And it will give you, like, you can put rough concepts in and it will give you ideas out. So that way you can make sure that you include those right terms. That helps for SEO. In terms of, targeting different types of customers, yes, I would split. When I was still running Facebook ads, I did see better results if you focus your ad on a specific group. Say, for example, the stay-at-home moms, because then you can tailor the image that you use, the wording that you use, and then your landing page. I mean, that would be like first prize. If the page they land on talk to them directly, the chance of conversion is higher. So definitely recommend that. Jonathan, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. Landing pages can be a great way to segment off your audience in general, because we did an entire episode on choosing an audience. Ultimately, for you as the entrepreneur, do what you want to do. In general, we find it best to focus on an audience and at least build that momentum and really find that you're making good progress. And then maybe it makes a lot of sense to add another one. But if you're going to serve multiple audiences, definitely create landing pages and campaigns and approaches that are unique and specific to that audience. And yeah, so great question. Krishna also asked some great questions from Krishna. What are the best ways to rank high in search engines? So Noelle just started touching on that. And I found to be really helpful in my experience and sort of working with search engines over the years and helping others is to ask the question, what would you do if search engines didn't exist? Because they haven't always been there. And back in the day, there were like things like directories, and people just focused on like, okay, if I have a new site on the web, how do people find it, right? And I think the main thing to keep in mind as you sort of think through that concept is to be focused on optimizing for people, right? Like ultimately, with the content that you're creating and the way that you're going about things, like it can be easy to forget that there's real people on the other side of the screen, right? And that's, I think, one of the biggest dangers that I see with a lot of the SEO focus and some of the resources out there is that we think of it too much like a game, like you got to get things just right. There's real people on the other side. And when you think about, okay, how do I connect with those real people out there and bring them in and then serve them well? The things that you do to do that well, as search engines get better and better at what they do, those activities become positive signals. And in my experience, when you think like that, like how do I get traffic in if search engines didn't exist? And how do I serve that traffic really well? If you do that, the search engines tend to notice that, and that becomes like the very significant amount of icing on the cake. So that's what I found helpful. It can be, there's so much that you could get into. There's so many resources out there that can be pretty overwhelming. Say, okay, what if search engines didn't exist? And what can I do to, instead of focusing on machines, optimizing for people? And in my experience, the search engines reward that. There's a great resource. So let's share this. I'm going to pull up my screen here. So if you're in WordPress, you've probably heard the name Yoast, and let's see. Yeah, that button. Yes, they've put together a great free basic Yoast Academy. And so it's a good way to learn some of the technical basics and aspects of SEO. So I highly recommend checking that out. Okay, so awesome questions. Thank you for sending those in. We've got more. So we've talked a bit about the acquisition side of things. What we ultimately want for you to do, we don't want you just to get new customers in, right? We want you to have happy customers who continue to purchase and continue to and tell others about it. So Noelle's going to share some thoughts next on how do you keep customers, and what should you be thinking about, and what are some of the things that you can do to make sure that when someone comes in, that you can keep them and the benefits that sort of come with that. So Noelle, over to you.
Yeah, so keeping happy customers, that's all about building long-term relationships, and they result in repeat sales over time. Or if it's something else, if it's maybe a subscription for ongoing subscription, but they will bring in more value than a one-off customer, right? So why would you want to do this? The impact that a long-term customer can have is a lot bigger than a short-term customer. Imagine if a friend to you says like, oh, these people are great. I've been buying from them for 5 years, or I've spent so much with them. That has a lot more impact than when somebody has just found this new company, right? Also, it is cheaper to retain a customer, to invest in that, than obtain a new one often. And it's also easier to build. Sorry, that's my puppy. It's easier to build on a existing relationship rather than starting a new one. So, what you got to think about is like, you got to think about the entire experience, as a whole. So it starts with, maybe they find you through social media. So it starts with, making people happy on social media, like connecting with them, using the right language. You drive them to your website, make sure it's fast, it's user-friendly, they have a great experience there. Then if you have a physical product, for example, you can really delight with that unboxing experience. We chatted about that before, but, you can arrange things like having it delivered at a specific time if you want to go that extra route. You can include like nice branded tissue paper and maybe some extras, a handwritten card. Oh, I just love it when people do that. Then you got to make sure you got a quality product. I mean, that's at its core, right? You want to make sure that people are happy with the product, that you've tested it thoroughly and all that kind of stuff. And through the whole process, also pre-sales and post-sales, you want your customer support to be fantastic. Should something go wrong, we're human. Something can happen. A parcel can go missing, whatever the case it may be. The key here is to communicate, in a really friendly and helpful way. And people will often forgive you then for whatever happened, but just communicate clearly and set expectations, and respond relatively quickly. That's what fabulous customer support is. And then, don't now leave the customer, okay, they're happy with their product. Okay, that's that. No, you follow up, you stay in touch, maybe you do it through your newsletter, and not just by selling to them, but by providing content that's helpful, for them. I mean, I've referenced them before, but I'll say it again. This seed company here in South Africa that specializes in like heirloom seeds, every so often they will just send this amazing overview of like all these things you can do in the garden every month. That's a fantastic way to stay in touch, and it makes me automatically think like, oh, okay, I should go and buy this or that, whatever is related to the content at that time. Yes, sorry.
I just wanted to add, when you talk about the customer support, I've seen this over and over again. Like, we don't want things to go wrong, right? We don't want things to go wrong. When they do, though, because as inevitably they do, because we live in a complex world and we're humans, that's always an opportunity to turn that into a great experience. Now, your customer may or may not receive that, but more often than not, like a negative review coming in, for instance, I've noticed, and there's, a negative review can be a great opportunity to show how you respond. And those can be a major reason why people choose to do business with you. They saw a negative review, because we know stuff happens. They saw a negative review and then seeing how you chose to respond to it. So I just want to encourage folks like, oh no, something's going wrong. Well, things going wrong are opportunities to show the customer that you value them, that you want to solve their problems, and then for you to learn from it. So I found that to be helpful, because that can be intimidating, daunting, especially early on. It's like, you want things to go well. Of course, we want it all to go smoothly, but they don't. And when they don't, those are opportunities to create value for your customers. And we tend to remember that more, right? Like when something went wrong and then they made it right, there's something that really sticks with us about that.
Yes, very true that. Also, what I want to touch on is on the topic of, staying in touch. There's like email automation that you can do. For example, there is a follow-up emails extension on the marketplace, that will allow you to say like, okay, maybe after a month or something like that, or a couple of weeks, it depends on your product and your niche entirely. But you send a follow-up email and you ask people to write a review, send them straight to the product page, ideally, ask them to leave a review there, create this awesome, user-generated content that, Google really likes. And, reviews are so important. People see them as personal recommendations almost. I mean, who doesn't check the reviews before making a purchase? I know I do all the time. What do the reviews say? Yeah. So it's so important. But also think about, what can you offer these people that have now once bought from you? What can you offer them next? Maybe a complementary product. Maybe a complementary product, or it depends on what niche you're in. If you're, for example, in the clothing industry, it's one thing, but we've seen like a beard company that does oils, but then they do like other beard accessories and wax, and they like added it on throughout time, right? So that's a fantastic idea. Lastly, I want to talk about rewarding and incentivizing your customers. There's quite a few ways you can do that. Coupons is maybe one of the most well-known ones. Coupons are also built into WooCommerce, though there are also excellent extensions out there that just amp them up. But I want to share this resource with you, which is how to use coupons and email to drive customer retention. And what they explain here, they use MailChimp in this example. And this is a setup that I've done for clients as well, which works really well. And honestly, like if you're working on your own website, I thought that this tutorial is really easy to follow along, and like you can definitely do this even if you're a beginner. But basically, you have people sign up on your website, and then you schedule an automated email containing a coupon, right? So either on the day they subscribe or whatever you want to do there, to then drive that traffic to your website and hopefully result in sales.
It's fantastic.
Then the next one that I want to share is it's a WooCommerce extension called Points and Rewards. And points and rewards can be used in many different ways. And I think, we've all like seen them around online. I know I'm definitely incentivized. If I can repeat buy, like for the puppy, I found this pet company. I'm like, oh, they do points. Okay, well, then I'm more likely to now choose them as, whenever I need a new toy, which is often, I go there and I build up points. And you can get kind of like quirky with them as well. You can customize this to like the language of your store and make them all fun if that's what you want to do. You can give people points for leaving a review even, so imagine combining that with a follow-up email. I think that would work really well. And then my last recommendation for rewards is gifts. For example, like when you have a customer that's maybe you're like tracking how many people have spent over a certain amount of time. And if people are like a VIP customer of yours, and really bringing in a lot, then consider sending them something complimentary. It doesn't have to be something expensive, but just a gesture that they thought of you and said thank you then, to the customer. I think that, that goes very far.
Oh, that's fantastic. So we had one question that came in around this idea of like working with customers. So someone asked, I'm a multi-channel seller. What's the best strategy to convert customers from my channels to my WooCommerce websites? What are your thoughts on that? You've got different channels out there, maybe Amazon, Walmart, like this or that. How can you convert those in to your WooCommerce site?
That's a really good question, and definitely something I need to think about. One thing I can say is that it's important to, on the different channels, have like kind of like a uniform presence. Have it all match. Have it like go as far as you can with the feel, the language of that it's you. And it makes you stand out. About driving, because when I think multi-channel seller, I think, for example, like Amazon and retail and then a WooCommerce shop. But Jonathan, how do you read this question? Because if somebody is already on, say, Amazon, don't you want them to just hit buy there instead of driving to WooCommerce?
Yeah, what I've seen with this is like people will use it as an acquisition strategy to be able to get some customers in, but within the context of keeping customers long term, it's like so what they'll often do is take maybe a basic product and put it up on Amazon, but then they'll have higher end products like on their own WooCommerce store. And if you ever want them to make the conversion, I think so much of what you just described is what matters here, where it's about focusing on the experience, right? Where what kind of little notes can you put in the box? So what types of, maybe a special landing page can you create for the folks? I've seen folks who'll do this thing where they're like, don't contact the manufacturer, or don't contact the retailer, contact us instead. But it's like, why would I want to do that? So think about the experience from your customer's perspective. Last question that came through was how do I hire help? Hillary wanted to know, like, if I want to get some vetted help for marketing, etc. And I just had two quick resources for you, and then we'll wrap up. The first was, I'm just going to put this here. Perfect. So we have a partnership with Codable where you can find, it's focused on WooCommerce developers, but there are also marketers in there. And this can be a great place to find some experts, especially for like a small project. You want to kick something off and try it. And then, of course, we have our Woo Experts directory where you can go to woocommerce.com/experts. And we've got a lot of great agencies in here. And within these agencies, there are folks who have that marketing experience and background as well. So most of it's focused on development, but there are folks with a strong marketing background, and that can be a great place to take a look. So I want to offer that for you. Awesome. Well, we had a lot of questions that came through, and we hope this is helpful. I think, to recapping it from my perspective, we want to see you create customers, but that are also happy long-term customers that are going to come back and buy again and tell others about it. And if you focus on thinking creatively about the acquisition side, finding where your audience is and connecting with them, and then once they become customers, if you focus on the experience and then use some of the tips that Noelle shared and some of the resources, that increases the likelihood that they become long-term customers that are happy with being a customer of yours, and then will tell others about it as well. Awesome. So next week, we're going to be talking about extending WooCommerce. We're going to get into extensions, and we've got a special guest joining us. WooCommerce Live will be the same time, same place next week. We look forward to seeing you there. Look for an announcement and more details later this week. And that is it for the main show. Now we're going to transition over to Q&A. Thank you. Awesome. Okay, there we go. I'm just going to switch my screen here. All right. So if you guys have questions, we'd love to answer anything that we weren't able to get to during the main show. Bring it on, and we will go from there. So let me just first jump to some of the questions that I'm just looking through if there's anything else that we didn't get to. Let's give that a moment. All right, perfect. I'm just going to jump up to Adil asked, how is AMP and schema is important for traffic? Can you recommend some easy tools? So AMP, assuming that you're referring to Google's accelerated mobile pages. So it's a bit of a controversial topic. I have a fair amount of experience working with that, and in general, I'm a fan of what AMP does. I wouldn't use it as a primary, like, build your whole thing on it, but within the context of WordPress and Woo, you can use plugins to bring AMP compatible versions of your site. The Google makes a plugin for AMP specifically that is a great starting point. And I haven't looked recently, but I'm pretty sure it has WooCommerce support in it. And from my perspective, and this is a great example of stuff that would be covered in the SEO Academy. From my perspective, this stuff does matter, like getting the proper schema in place, but these days it's a lot less complex than it used to be. You can install some plugins. Yoast handles a lot of the schema stuff. They have a WooCommerce extension that goes into even more detail. And I would recommend starting there. Look at Google's AMP plugin, and then look at Yoast's WooCommerce extension, and as far as getting that metadata in a good place. Let's see here. Let's jump over to, I'm just going to put you, we have Marcus who asks, I want my customers to also include resellers. What's a good way to set up resellers? Noelle, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so you can definitely set up a site that caters to both customers directly and resellers, right? Like, you can have the resellers log in, and you can give them a specific role, and you can set up your pricing. I know WooCommerce dynamic pricing is one of the extensions you can achieve this with, but I know there are others out there. You can have your products display different prices depending on what the role is of the person that's logged in. So that's a great way, then you can cater to both, and the customer never has to see the reseller prices.
Awesome. I'm looking at, okay, so Jose asked, how can I add a quantity on my shop page? Do you have a plugin or code? Thanks in advance. And good job. Thank you, Jose. Appreciate that. So I'm assuming what you're referring to is, like, on your shop index page, being able to add quantity versus being on the individual product page. Is that familiar to you, Noelle?
I've seen it around. I haven't had a need to implement it, to be honest, with the shops that I have built.
So I haven't used this particular plugin, but I'm just checking quickly. This one here, do you want to add quantity field on shop page of WooCommerce? No configuration, it adds the quantity to the loop and how it's displayed. So I don't know about this specific plugin, but I think this is a good example of plugin territory where it can modify the default loop and add additional things like quantity to it.
Yeah, and something that Jose can also maybe consider, depending on the product, it could be useful if instead of exploring the quantity field, have what they call a quick view. Often they do it with like a little eye icon that somebody clicks on, and you get this pop-up that's basically like a mini product page, that just has like an image, very short description, and you can add to cart and do the quantity there. Sometimes it's helpful to display just that little bit extra information. But again, with many questions, it depends.
Yep. Awesome. Max asks, can we use WooCommerce like Zomato or the multi-restaurant seller? So Zomato, if I'm recalling correctly, is let me just pull it up. I'm going to pull it up on screen here. Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to. There we go. So yes, I'm familiar with this. So discover the best food and drinks, and it looks for your location. So it aggregates, it serves as like a big marketplace, right? Yes, this is a pretty common example of how folks will use the marketplace. Now it's work, right? So someone asked this at a local meetup, and there was a few different extensions that were recommended that sort of do the multi-vendor marketplace stuff really well. I think there's two broad categories. If anyone remembers in chat, please feel free to drop those in. I think there's two main players, is what I meant to say, that offer like the marketplace and vendor setup. And the work is probably more in like how do you customize that and set up the theme, but in terms of the raw ingredients, no pun intended, within the context of food, that this is I think to me a good example of how you would use Woo and leverage sort of what's out there already. Let's see. So YouTube Money asks, which of these hosts, like Bluehost or WordPress, work with to checkout? So in terms of your payment gateways, that shouldn't really, it's not host dependent. I'm not aware of a situation where you wouldn't be able to use a payment gateway of preference with a particular host. So that if that was the case, I'd be curious about it. But in most cases, you pick a good host that you're happy with. If you're looking for hosting recommendations, you can go to, we have a recommendations page. You just see me. Okay, well, I'll have to find it. Clearly, we have a little bit of SEO work, or I could spell it right. I'll drop a link as soon as I pull that up there. Let's see. While we do that, Raj asks about augmented reality for trying on beauty products. Noelle, any experience with that? Or any thoughts on that?
Wow. No, but I'd love to know because, obviously augmented reality is on the rise. And, AR, I mean, I don't know if he means like, because you can go very far, you can go, you're looking at yourself in the camera, and you're moving and you have it on. But a simpler version is uploading a photo of yours and whatever plugin you use, it like layers it on. I've seen that done with rings on a jewelry site the other day, for example. But I would really love to know. I don't know. You, Jonathan?
I'm going to check to see. This is definitely a category where we're seeing more people work on things. But in terms of specific recommendations, so I'm just going to show this up on the screen here. So there are plugins already. So like Cart Magician, augmented reality for WooCommerce. I'm sure that there's others as well, but I think the first thing I'm curious about this. It'd be interesting to see what folks have done. I think part of it, what it goes back to, is thinking about the audience that you've picked, the problem that they have, and thinking about what's useful for them. This isn't useful for some audiences, and it can be very useful for other audiences, right? To try and be able to picture something and Yeah, the starting point though is to be curious and look and see what's out there. A deal mentions that Reddit's also a place of value where you can get audience. Yeah, agree entirely. Reddit can be, you can find some fantastic sub communities focused on particular audience. I was I had a friend of mine who was starting an e-commerce store focused on garlic, and I found this entire subreddit dedicated to garlic, and it just sort of blew my mind of like people showing off their pictures and it's Reddit can be a great place to find communities focused on a specific audience that you're wanting to serve. Let's see. Any other questions you guys have? It can be a hard question, easy questions. Max also asked about the Rank Math SEO plugin. I'm not familiar with that. Are you familiar, Noelle?
I've seen discussions around of rank math versus all-in-one SEO versus Yoast. And so it's not necessarily, I mean, I have started with Yoast many years ago, or was stuck with Yoast, so I can't give unbiased opinion. They are all three of the ones I mentioned are strong players in the field, and some people prefer this one because of this, and some. So, I would say it's a good contender. Have a look at them. I'm sure that there is blog posts around comparing them as well. So yeah, but I know people that have had good results with it.
Awesome. Let's see here. Oh, I had a couple more things real quick. So on the hosting front, if you're looking for hosting, we have a hosting solutions page. We can put a link, we'll add to the show notes afterwards, where you can find some of the hosts that we have partnerships with and recommend at WooCommerce. And these can be a great starting point. There's lots of hosts out there, great hosts, including hosts that aren't on this page, but this can be a great starting point as you're looking. Max had a few other questions here. So the customer wants responsive design, but couldn't find a good theme. Any theme suggestions? This is a broad one. Noelle, what are your initial thoughts? I want to pull up a resource while you're doing that.
So some, I would say all, good quality premium themes that I see around, have responsiveness. Some do it better than others though. Yeah. I'm finding that, for example, I build websites using Divi sometimes, and even though it has responsiveness built in order to get it just so, I do still have to customize that. I know that, for example, Storefront out of the box is quite nicely responsive. So it also depends on your niche, what theme will fit with you. But I would say, most of them are responsive, and also, test it out. People often don't think of this maybe, but when you're on a theme website and you're vetting it and you're looking at the demo, look at the demo on your phone and go and see.
Yep. Yeah. And look on different phones as well, right? Like,
yeah,
you can. If you have, borrow your phone real quick.
Your tablet, if you have, or your big desktop versus your small laptop. If that's a really important factor for you, then yeah, go ahead and test.
We're at an interesting place right now with themes because, as many of you know, so WordPress has the new editor, which is fantastic and getting better all the time. And themes are in this place of like, how do we adjust to that? How do we work with that? So within the builder realm, so many of you are familiar with like page builders in WordPress, you can go with an approach. You can go with something like Elementor or Divi, which have big communities and they have strong support for WooCommerce. So that can be a good option to go. In general, I'm biased towards plugins and themes that leverage the built-in editor in WordPress because I think that's increasingly an important aspect of the future. So one resource that you can take a look at is on the WooCommerce marketplace. We have themes that are responsive and that are sort of niche specific and have been worked on specifically for their WooCommerce compatibility. So there's some new ones there and new ones being added on a fairly regular basis. So that can be a helpful starting point if you aren't aware of that. Awesome. All right, let's see what else we have. Ideal asked, sometimes we come across chargebacks while selling products. What do you recommend for that? Noel, what are your thoughts?
I'm just trying to get the wording right in my head, like chargebacks, as in people claiming it like through their credit card.
Yeah.
He's not yeah. Okay. What do you recommend for that? I actually haven't had clients dealing with chargebacks.
Gotcha.
I've had to deal with refunds. So my experience in this area isn't great. How about yours?
Yeah. So assuming that you're dealing with at the bank level, you first, oftentimes you just have to take the hit, right? And sort of deal with that. And then ask yourself questions like, all right, am I focused on the right audience? Is there things that I could have done on the customer experience front to prevent us from getting there? Because when someone gets to a chargeback, there's usually not a good returning point from that. Your payment provider doesn't like to see that. If you see too many of those, they can kick you off. So you want to just deal with them quickly. And then I would encourage you to ask questions about, ask yourself, okay, is there a problem with the audience that I'm focused on? Is there something that's mismatched here? Like what's leading to the chargeback? In some cases, it can be fraud, and that's unfortunate. And there might be ways that you can work with the payment provider to help mitigate some of that. But then I would see it as an opportunity to ask bigger questions. Okay, chargebacks are inevitable as you deal with more customers, and it's just a part of doing business. But if you're seeing a lot of it, then I would use that to ask yourself questions about, is this the right audience? Is there something I can do to communicate more proactively? Like what's the nature of it? And because it can be frustrating, super frustrating, but it can be a starting point to lead to you making some breakthroughs in like how you do things. And Adil clarified he's talking about fraud specifically. So there are some fraud solutions out there that can help like do some basic prevention, but I think it's a bigger, more holistic question. If you can have if you have any proof of it, that's something you can probably work with your payment provider on, but ultimately you want to do what you can to prevent it from the beginning. I think.
Yeah, true that. Though when you compare payment providers, maybe you can look at that, how they handle that. I can imagine it differ from payment provider to payment provider. So if that's a factor to you, have a look around at the big payment providers and see how they handle such a thing.
Chidi asks about the free version versus paid version of Yoast SEO. What are your thoughts? So I've used Yoast Premium and not on personal projects. Noelle, you have any strong thoughts on this?
Yeah, I regularly work with both for my clients. Some people tend to think that they will rank higher with the paid version. Let me just clarify that that's not. It doesn't influence that. However, it offers some helpful tools. Some of my clients who do a lot of work on the website themselves, like writing blog posts and things like that, they find a redirect manager very helpful, for example. That comes with a premium feature. And it also comes with a feature to kind of help you link your content together, different pages together logically, which does strengthen your SEO. So that is quite useful. So, depending on your business and your needs, have a look and compare. But you can get great results with the free version.
Yeah, and Yoast's model as a whole is provide a lot of great value up front at scale with the free plugin, and they've done that consistently over the years. And I would just encourage you to look at it. Right, you can get a lot of value out of what they offer out of the box, and then if paid is a good match for your needs, if you see clear value, then in my experience and from hearing from others, it's definitely a high return for what you invest in it. Awesome. Yeah. Let's see if there's any other questions. Let's see. Scrolling up here. Marcus just added a point on this question of fraud, and I'll take a note of that, because fraud is something that's an unfortunate reality. That may be something we can cover in more detail in a future episode. Marcus recommends spending more money to have shipment tracking, which can help at the bank level to say, hey, my product was delivered, right? Because it's a bit of an unfortunate reality. It's the other side of all this incredible scale that we have access to on the web is, yes, that there's also more room for fraud. And Adil asks about there's a plugin in the WooCommerce marketplace focused on anti-fraud. Is it worth it? I'm going to be biased. In general, if we have something in the marketplace, it's because it's because we stand behind it and we think there's value there. So I'd recommend certainly checking to see what's there and using that as a starting point. I'm just looking through here. Max brought up that customer wants the tracking system, like an order status process bar, like to show the progress. Any suggestions about that? I don't have a specific suggestion, but I think that's a fairly common type of extension request. I'm going to throw a different suggestion. On the Facebook group, that can be a great way to get aggregated insights from like other folks, because this to me is a good example of something that's a fairly common thing. I haven't done it personally in Woo, but I've thought about it, where like you wanted to show folks the different steps in a process. So this could be a good one to go to the Facebook group or Reddit if you like that, and say, hey, this is what I'm working on, and what plugins have you guys used to sort of show this off. Noelle, are you aware of anything specific that you've used?
No, actually not specific. Also not had, in all these many years, not had a use for one, honestly, or not had specific requests for one. We know that in the customer backend, Woo does give a status, but if you want a bar, we would need to have a look at extensions for that.
Okay, awesome.
Also, I imagine that kind of thing would integrate with the courier that you have. So then the courier plugin need to push back to automate it, or you need to update it yourself to display correctly, depending which route you want to go.
Michelle asks, do you have any suggestions to increase conversion by chatbot? Ooh, so chatbots can be a lot of fun. They can also be a big nuisance. So in my experience working with chatbots, I think the first thing is to, again, focus on the audience that you're serving, the problem that they have. And like a chatbot can be a great way to do some find them at a point where it's useful. Like, for instance, think about which pages you put chatbot on. It might not make as much sense on the home page as on a page that's more specific to, like, if they're on your FAQ page, for instance. And that could be a good way to put a custom prompt where it's like, hey, was there a question that we didn't answer? Or if they're on their product page.
Yeah. You know what? I so agree. It's a pet peeve of mine. Then I get to a homepage somewhere and literally like that second, it's like ping. And I'm like, give me a chance to look around.
Yeah. Chatbots can be fantastic, especially when you hook them up. Like, you can hook them up to be live, right? Where they can pipe you through. So there's a number of different providers out there. I don't have a strong recommendation on that, but I've played with them quite a bit back in the day, and I find it can be highly effective. But just think about the experience that you're creating for your customer. And first, like, don't try to annoy them with it. And oftentimes it's like, oh, we want it to work, so we'll like turn it up and show it to everyone. And you might get a few more hits and engagements with it, but you could end up annoying a lot more folks too. But think about where would it be useful. Yeah. This is where, in general, I find people are often too focused on the short term versus long term. Like if you put a really aggressive pop up short term, you might get more conversions. Long term, though, you probably annoyed people, and you've lost folks who felt that focus on the short term. Awesome. Well, do you guys have any other questions? We have just a couple minutes left. I appreciate all the questions that you've shared. And in general, if you're not already, would encourage you to make good use of the different WooCommerce community spaces. Join a local meetup. That's a great place to ask questions. And right now, nearly all of the meetups are virtual. So it's a fantastic opportunity to travel the globe and be able to experience what its meetups are like in different places at different times. The Facebook group is a fantastic way to get a lot of different insights and perspectives from folks, where you can ask a question and get a lot of different answers. That can be overwhelming at times, but overall, I find that to be a very helpful way of like, okay, how are people thinking about this, and what do folks think about? What options might folks recommend?
Yeah, and that way you might get in touch with people that are in a niche like, similar like yours. So you can maybe find answers more specific to your niche than a general answer. So I think that's a great benefit from asking in the Facebook group, for example.
Yeah, and with more than almost 40,000 members, and it's quite active, that there's a good chance that other folks sort of come across it. And that's a lot of what we're trying to do with Woo Live here is take the questions you guys are answering and try to act as just bring more attention to them, right? And if anyone, if you're watching, if you have answers to some of these questions or thoughts, leave them as comments there in YouTube or on Facebook. Pass on. I see some of you guys are doing that, which is fantastic. We want to do our best to focus on the topics that you find interesting and offer some initial answers. We have some. We've been in this space for a long time, but ultimately what makes WooCommerce powerful is this bigger community that we're all a part of, where we each have experience and insights to share. And our hope with Woo Live is to help facilitate that happening more easily and make it more accessible on a regular basis. So awesome. That's all I've got. I saw Marcus clarified a question about resellers. So just to make sure that it's not, I'm not making assumptions. So the marketplace is growing at a rapid pace, and there are more plugins and extensions focused on. So if you go there and just look for reseller, I had a few that showed up. So yeah, there's more there all the time. I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to spend some time in the marketplace and just poke around. We have great support and we back up everything there. So if there's, you try something out and it's not a good fit, you can get that taken care of. And there's a lot of good stuff there and more being added all the time. Noelle, any closing thoughts?
No, thanks so much, guys, for submitting all these questions. It's awesome. It's my favorite part of the show, to be honest. So come back next time.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. We'll see you guys next week. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.